Greetings, everyone. And once again, it is a beautiful Monday evening out here on the West Coast. And welcome to An Imperfect Union, brought to you by the Political Consciousness West Coast Steeler fan. And as you can see down below, that is the gentleman here. Um, had a great weekend in Vegas. Just getting back this morning, as a matter of fact. But since last week, a lot of things have happened. Um, and as soon as some of my panel get here, uh, okay, well, we'll see. As I said, as soon as some of my panel gets here, uh, we'll talk about this Roe versus Wade controversy. I see Mr. Scott is down here in the queue. I have to get Mr. Scott here. Mr. Scott, how are you doing this week?
Pretty good. Pretty good. And yourself, James? Things are
Uh,
going pretty good. Things are going pretty good my way.
I know, even though it's a different show. I expected you to be on Thursday after your Twins had swept the Tigers.
Yeah, I really, I had watched that game and I had a little bite to eat, and then I really wanted to get with Demetrius to get his thoughts on that. To see what Demetrius would have had some comments on that. Sure, it would have been quite interesting.
Well, he had some comments that he was glad that you weren't there. So, yeah, we definitely had some comments about it. But Mr. Scott, since you and I are here, I'm going to go a little bit off the script because I was
Sure.
going to talk a little bit about Roe versus Wade, but
Mm, mm.
uh, I decided, well, while we're here, I'm going to ask you more about this January 6th thing. We all know who led it and all that. We all know that it was the, the Trump or the party of Trump that was responsible for it. But with all of these hearings and everything that's going on, has that really had any impact in our black community?
Well, James, when you say the party of Trump, do you mean the Republicans, or do
Yes,
you?
sir. I mean, the Republicans are the party of Trump, as far as I'm concerned. Like, you can put it on the record, you can put anywhere but on my hat. I consider the the Republicans the party of Trump.
So it's one
If
and the same. It's one and the same.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Undoubtedly. You know, if you had a Trump sign in your yard, just because you've taken it down doesn't mean that you still don't have that mindset.
Yeah. Well, yeah. James, as far as the Trump, and I've espoused this on Don Allen's program many times, but Trump, I don't even use the word. I just say 45 because the
Well, that's
man
how I
makes
used to call him. Yes.
he makes me want to vomit, as my grandmother would say. He just makes me want to vomit every time I think of him. I mean, he has been the worst and the cause of all of this upheaval, putting these people on the Supreme Court, causing this thing January 6th that we've been talking about. It's obvious. They have talked to people, they have talked to his higher ups that said this man incited this January 6th thing. And there was one man, he was on today. I can't think of what his name was. He was a high up But he said he didn't know, he didn't want to lose his job because he said he didn't have any idea who Trump would replace him with. I mean, this man was fearful of what this fool was doing with this whole overthrowing the government, overthrowing the election, stuff about what happened on January 6th. I mean, they should round these people up. They got pictures of them, they got video of them. They need to round these people up. But it's becoming similar, James, to back in the days when they used to lynch us. And they would have pictures. They would have show pictures of people, kids, families, and everything there, just smiling and looking at it. But it's a lynching. We don't know who did it. It's a lynching. We can't. And you got the people's picture right there. And it's the same thing with January 6th. But they're not doing anything.
but
Mitch McConnell and them are able to keep this thing under wraps.
but see, don't you find it the timing? None of these people say anything about 45 until they go out on their book tours. Then all of a sudden, well, do you know all this chaos that we had in the White House and all. But before that, I mean, even what was the guy with the white mustache that went all over everywhere talking,
Yeah,
eh,
yeah.
you know,
Oh, yeah.
you know, you know. But as soon as it was time for them to get a book out, oh man, we had nothing to do with this. Was all 45. Do you know that we prevented this, this, and this? Well, I mean, you know, it, it, to me, it's kind of like those gunshot things. You record how many gunshots. It don't say nothing about who did it. Sure, it's recorded. Now all of a sudden, somebody comes out and says, "Well, we actually had pictures of those people, but we were afraid of losing our jobs." How does that work for you? In a family situation, Mr. Scott. I mean, given your prior back, suppose somebody comes to you with that kind of, you know, well, we didn't know the child was abused because, well, he only weighs 11 pounds and he's 12 years old, but we didn't know that, we thought he was supposed to look like that.
I, I, James, I can't really, because I have seen what you've just said in child protection. I have
See,
seen, I have had situations where police and social workers and investigators have gone to this house and seen these little girls, these two twins in this house being abused and don't do anything. Finally, don't do anything. They haven't been going to school. They haven't been doing anything. But see, this is the whole look the other way thing, and this is where we got to get people in these jobs, in these politics kind of things that they're going to just kill it like it is. They're not. See, all these people, these politicians, and all these people, James, they are talking so that they can get reelected. They are telling us things so that this will help them get reelected. They're not doing things to help correct all these things that are going on in this country. They're just saying whatever it is to help them get reelected. This is what they're doing. They're constantly politicking. They're
well,
not trying to address these issues.
well. See, most of these people that are coming out were appointed. They weren't really elected, and most of them were already, you know, well to do. But of course, like I said, now all of a sudden they have these best-selling books out that are on, the nation's bestseller list, and they're number one, two, and five, and seven, and so forth and so on. All of them in the top 25 on the political uh, realm. But my problem is we have went through all of this. we have heard about all of this, and like you said, we have video, we have pictures of these people that have actually went inside the Senate Hall chamber. The lady that was out here that got shot, they're actually raising money for her family, and they're claiming that she was uh, how did they put it? She's a martyr for the right wing out here, and the white supremacists. And the if if you recall, when 45 was in office, he had that square cleared of protesters. Black Lives Matter. There was a few other they claim Antifa, whoever was there. But the the point is, he had that square cleared. He went out, took a picture with the Bible held upside down. You recall what I'm talking about now?
Yeah, technical,
Okay,
technical.
all right. The one of the uh, what is that the organization that was protecting Trump and others. He got uh, he went to jail because he snatched down a Black Lives Matter flag from a church. Supposed to be one of the oldest churches in D.C. and he burned the flag. But these people invade D.C. and I think the most that I've heard so far is 7 months. Some get 11 months. Mr. Scott, this is not jail time. Well, this is not prison. Ask some of those people that are in jail for selling a $5 bag of marijuana for 10 years.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the black community, you know, and I'm gonna get real kind of on the edge here, but at the snap of a hat, we can find $22 billion for the Ukraine. But I'll bet you can't find $2 million to build a high school in your neighborhood.
Well, again, James, the January 6th was an armed insurrection. Okay, this was an armed insurrection on our capital, and when I say our, we are foundational Americans in this country, black people. This was an armed insurrection, and it should have been put back, and those people should be held accountable, and they should be let known that this is not tolerated and it's not going to happen again. But see, this is where the priorities are. This, of course, the priorities. These Republicans now with this election coming up, we have so many distractions. They've come now the pandemic is supposed to be raging again. We're supposed to be worried about that. Nuclear war over with this Putin that's going over here thinking he can turn back the hands of time and make Russia the old Russia again. He's trying to go back to Stalin and all that mess that's already been taken care of. And those people don't want that in Ukraine. They want to be more like the West. That's what they want to do. That's what they have said they want for their country. But no, he's going to usurp that. So we have so much going on. And here in Minnesota, they can't even figure out what to do with the George Floyd Square area. I mean, this has ruined our city. It's tore down. I mean, police stations, post offices, banks, They have. It's going to be years before this city comes back. It's going to be years before this city comes back, because these people are not, and they can't even figure out what to do on 38th and Chicago Avenue. They need to get all of this stuff out of there, put this thing back. You got buses running in city on neighborhoods and things that they shouldn't even be running on, because they have that street and all around their clothes because of that. And it's being run not by the city, just by people that say we're running it now, we're in charge. So there's no infrastructure there, there's no business there. The people that have businesses there are suffering. The people that live around are suffering. And the politicians don't do anything.
Mr.
And
Scott,
it
Mr.
makes
Scott,
you,
let me, you know, maybe uh, because I hear the same thing from you and Miss Sims, and I understand your pain, but do you realize that there are parts of Detroit that still haven't recovered from the riots in 1967?
I certainly do. My grandfather, I got relatives all over Detroit. I certainly do.
I mean, so if we have accepted this all of this time, why do you think that someone is going to feel it necessary to
Yeah.
come back and rebuild your neighborhood?
Yeah, and James, you have hit it right on the head. That is the bigger, that's the elephant in the room, because now all the decline of all of these cities, and it's just our turn now. Basically, is what it looks like. It's just the turn of the Twin Cities to hit that decline, like all these inner cities have around this country. We had avoided it, but all of a sudden now it's here,
Yeah.
and they're not
Yes.
moving. And as you say, they're not moving with any great haste to do anything about it. I mean, and then you have a lot of people that are coming in here that are used to that. They're coming from the Detroits, the Chicagos, the Garys, who are used to seeing their cities look like that. They're
That's
used to
right.
they're used to seeing this type of a thing. And then we have the many Somalis, and I mean people from other countries. I don't know. My wife and I used to go to Jamaica. We used to go to Mexico. We used to go vacation. You go into Jamaica, yeah, they have street lights there, but they don't work. They have lanes for cars, but nobody pays no attention to it. They drive up on the sidewalk if they want. You got to watch where you're going. But that mentality is here now. This mentality is, it's, uh,
Well, but see,
yes,
it's like you say, it's their turn because, as I've said, on this show before, there was a certain period in my life when I went somewhere and the neighborhood store was owned by Mr. Berman, the old
sure.
white guy, that everybody in the neighborhood knew. He's the
Lived
only
right
white guy,
around the corner. Yeah.
right? And then I went away and I came back, and the people were Arabic. Then I went away and I came back again, and the people were Ethiopian. And now, as you say, you had the Somalis. At one time, you had the Nigerian. Every race, every creed that comes to this country gets treated that better than the people that are here. And we have accepted this because, and this is a phrase that I really hate to use, but because we still have that slave mentality, we would rather follow. We want someone else to take the lead because we are all of our leaders get killed. You can go from Marcus Garvey all the way. I mean, however far back you want to go. Something happens to the leaders of the black community. But if the black has a foreign name, he can come to power over the people that were already here. As you said, I mean, you use the Somali neighborhood over here. Uh, you know, when I first moved out here in 2003, the Somali neighborhood had one of the highest crime rates in San Diego. But when people start investing in the Somali community, all of a sudden the crime went down within that community. And most importantly, the tourists start going back in that community. They start supporting the restaurants. They started making sure, one thing that you'll find out, I don't know whether you've ever been out here or not, Mr. Scott,
No, but I want to. No.
but if people come, tourists, they will clean stuff up really quick. If your community is broken down and there are gunshots and people dying in your community, you're not going to attract business. And people out here, especially in the foreign community, because we have a section out here called Old Town, which is a Mexican community, but it's mostly a tourist business. Now you can go out to the barrio, but there's no businesses out there. You can go to the hood, and there's no businesses out there. And why is that, Mr. Scott? Why don't we police our own communities like these other minorities do?
Boy, that's what I observe is that anytime we have tried to do these things, it's always broken up. I mean, we have had successful areas in the different cities, but it's always broken up for whatever reason. It's my dad does the books, the Scott collection, and he had a book that he didn't quite finish in the 70s. It's more of a magazine. And when I go into this book, which I'm going to reprint this book also because it has maybe 20, 25 businesses, all black in the Twin Cities area. And I mean, it's a whole variety of businesses. It's everything you could think of: limousine service, dog grooming, barbershops, the drugstore. I mean, anything you could think of, grocery stores, little grocery stores in the neighborhood. But this neighborhood has been broken up now. All that business area is gone. It's either they didn't put a fire station there, they have vacant lots there, there's nothing there anymore. They just eradicate that. But you can go 10 miles, 5 miles down the street, and there's a whole neighborhood enclave with banks and everything in there, but it's white folks. But for
It's
the
the
black
same.
folk, it's just this is what happens. Hello, Dr. Casey.
Hey, it's like that in Dayton, Ohio too, where I'm originally from. Where if you go right around the corner, it's like a plethora of things, but it's more in the white end of town. But on the west side, after General Motors left, it's like shot. They've taken out the grocery stores, everything that's essential. It's no longer on the west side.
Uh, Dr. Casey, good evening.
How you guys doing?
Now, a lot of
For
people
you,
might not be, uh, uh, how should I say, they might not know because they hear the name Ohio.
Hmm.
Some people might think that Ohio is north, but actually, Ohio, like you said, like once General Motors moved out,
Hmm.
you can point. I can point you to Lordstown. I can point you to Warren, Ohio. Anywhere because you know, once again, when those plants were put there, the first to be hired were black people. All of the
Yeah,
bosses were white now. You know,
yeah,
your
yeah.
supervisor was white. Your foreman might be black, but he answered this to a person that was different.
Mhm.
And Dayton, Canfield, all of that is territory. you, you know, to
And
be real about
same with Indiana.
Well,
Same same with
I was
Indiana. Same with Indiana.
right,
That's a
right.
big clan place.
when
And
I was
in
growing up,
Anderson,
I didn't
Indiana,
realize it.
in Anderson, Indiana, where a lot of my folks from down south in Birmingham and Talladega, they went up there to work in the auto industry up there in Anderson. There's a big enclave of Lollards there. But that's gone. They the same thing in Indiana. And when I went to Indiana, I thought I was down south. It felt
Terra
like
Terra Hut. Look at. I mean, just look at what happened to
I've
Terra Hut
heard of it.
once.
Fort
What,
Wayne, Terre Haute. I've heard.
yeah, yeah. I mean, so but Dr. Casey, I didn't. You saw what I hadn't intended to originally talk about, but since just me and Mr. Scott was here, that's kind of like us, being on the Supreme Court saying
Right.
stuff. So,
Right,
yeah.
right.
So we were talking about January 6th and whether all of this really has any impact with the black community whatsoever.
Okay, so first let me say that growing up in Ohio, I did not experience a lot of racism. Like I don't know of it like that. It could be where I'm from, it could be who my grandmother is, it could be a lot of various things. But um when I think about January the 6th, now I think I might have uploaded some episodes about this because I talk about this on Speaking Freedom TV. I don't know if it's had an impact on the black community. I am torn on how to feel because one side of me um marvels in the fact that um Caucasians are the ones tearing up the shit. And because I believe that for change to come, it's going to have to come through them. Now we got to get more a better cause to run for them to run up in there. But I definitely believe that the way to affect change is going to be from them doing something that's going to force change in a way that will in the end benefit us, but it's a lot of things that are broken within our system that has to be addressed, that has to be pointed out. So this for me is another one of those instances and those power plays that allow us to see the weaknesses. I mean, not just us. It is crazy and wild because it is showing the world the weaknesses of our government, of the structure, even the racism and all that, all of those things. Well, let me not act like racism isn't everywhere that Europeans are, but it is showing us where we can push our limits and what we can do because our generation has never seen um how far we could go. It's always been a limit. It's always been, very capped. So, overall, it will definitely show us how to move forward. Um, Now I always talk about January the 6th and um like to point out the difference between what they did and what an insurrection is. Because technically speaking, um the European Americans can't do a insurrection because it's them against them. That is actually a term that's created for black revolt. Um Based on I read a lot of books, but this particular book that I read about was John the abolitionist and or John Brown, I believe his
John
name is.
Brown.
Yeah.
John
Uh-huh,
Brown.
uh-huh, uh-huh. And it was very It was very detailed. It was very enlightening on how things are run. And it was so crazy because it was around the same time that I was reading this that it was happening. And the way the book speaks is that the only thing that can be considered an insurrection is if black people or the slaves were to have revolted against the government. When they do it themselves, is nothing. Like they're not going to treat it the same because it's the goal is to keep the brown people enslaved even when slavery is supposed to not exist. So, if we were to go in and do that, that's why they be so heavily armed when we peacefully protest because they fear that true insurrection. What they did is just giving us a presentation of the possibilities.
But
And then, but
John,
see, then overreaching that point, which is so true, is that this country has held itself out as this great democracy,
And it's not.
and it's not. See,
Mm-mm.
this country
But
has
we're
held
seeing that.
itself, has held itself out, as this great democracy, which is a lie, which is not true at all. And that's where we get into this whole. Yeah, I see when James and I were talking earlier about the January 6th. This was a group of armed insurrectionists that stormed this Capitol. They were armed to do that, but yet and still they're slapped on the wrist. They're just if they're not even that much slapped on
Why?
the wrist.
but Dr. Casey, you brought up an interesting point here because you said something about a cap, your generation, and I thought that our generation had reached a cap when we had all the leaders of the 70s and 80s, Malcolm, uh, uh, at that particular time, Martin Luther King, Stokes, uh, Carmichael. There were quite a few. And then Mr. Scott's generation came along. And they decided that they wanted to be equal opportunity. So they decided that, all right, we're going to be equal to those people. We want to adopt their education. We're going to get college at a discount. We're going to become landowners. We're going to buy houses. We're going to have property. We're going to be property owners. Hmm, that was another cap. Dr. Casey, where did your cap come from?
Well, no, we don't have a cap. We are being shown that there is really no cap, and what I stated was that we've seen nothing but caps from the previous generation. So all we're used to is seeing a cap. Like we're used to seeing, okay, you can go this far, but they gonna ceiling you, and they're gonna tell you about this glass ceiling to keep you contained as much as possible. And now we're seeing, and it's really being presented and played out before us that there is no real glass ceiling except for the illusion of the one that they've created.
Uh, Mr. Scott.
Oh, wait. So
Okay.
I also wanted to talk about the electoral college because um when we look at the democracy and when we see how the electoral college really works versus how people thought the election worked, um it really shows us that the people don't really have the power if the electoral college has the final say.
Right. The abolishment of the electoral college is something that that should have been discussed before Roe versus Wade. But anyway,
Right.
Mr. Scott, uh, have you ever noticed that freeways get off? in the suburbs rather than go through the suburbs?
Well, of course. I mean, the freeway go through historically black neighborhoods. All these neighborhoods that we've talked about, there were business areas, and they serve two purposes. One, to eradicate all those areas, and then to segregate the land and the properties within the boundaries of that freeway. It's just like a big fence is where it's put in, and so back, as we were saying, back in the old, 60s, 70s, as I was growing up, you notice that there was an influx of a lot of black mayors in major cities. You had Coleman Young in Detroit, for he must have been there 25 years. He must have been there 25 years. Louis Stokes in Cleveland. I mean, Maynard in Atlanta, who really did some very good things in Georgia. But what that did was they weren't able to get this government money in to deal with these infrastructures. And during that same time is when these freeways came in. The freeways came in through St. Paul and Minneapolis in particular. They really eradicated the whole black communities. And when I was talking about these books that Dad did, one book in the 70s of these businesses, they were all wiped out by the freeway. Almost every one of them was wiped out by the freeway coming through. And those things just don't get rebuilt, as we've talked about. And so it's always a starting over. It's always a starting over. And they've run so much game on us from the time of supposedly ending slavery, for supposedly Reconstruction. Then they came up with this bullshit about separate but equal. And that allowed them to actually go so far as to put signs on a damn drinking fountain for whites only. And that was the law. That was the law of the land until the 50s and 60s, when they came up with these other things that really is all lip service. I mean, when you really look at how these things have came down to help black communities and to make opportunities, see, we've proven that all we need is an opportunity. We've proven that if we get the opportunity, we can flourish in whatever thing we're given a chance to do. But that's why they keep the opportunity down. They take the opportunities away from you, so that because they know how foolish it was for them to say black people can't play baseball, can't play basketball. I mean, how silly, how stupid. I mean, just as an example, when they say things like, what did I read in the paper the other day? I put a little historical thing in the paper about this different things that have happened in history in the Twin Cities. And they had this brother, they said he's the first black man to actually play in a professional baseball team. It was in the early 1900s. And I'm like, no, he's just the first person that they allowed to do it. He's not the first person. Jackie Robinson wasn't the first person that could. He's just the first person that's allowed to do it. And so they get you with these words and they get you with these statements that are like the native said, you speak with forked tongue.
Mr. Scott,
They saw it right away. Speak with forked tongue.
Mr. Scott, do you actually believe that there's only one black man in the United States of America that can play hockey?
No, see, this is.
I mean,
I know this is,
I mean, to a lot of people that might sound silly, but there's a lot of black people that grew up in the cold. There's a lot of black
James.
people that can skate. you
I
know,
don't know if you happen to see the show with Don Allen. A few weeks ago, we had a lady on, and she's a native of Haiti, and she's running from an office for an
yes, yeah.
office here. And so I was talking to her about how growing up in Haiti and right across the street is the Dominican Republic. And I said, well, in the Dominican, there's all kinds of ball players. There's all kinds of things from the Dominican, but nobody from Haiti. You can't tell me that there isn't a whole bunch of untapped talent in all kind of things in Haiti. and I know this isn't a sports thing, but the Vikings did draft a brother, number one, who is a native of Haiti. So, I mean, that see, it just shows the whole fallacy of the things that we have been sold from religion, from business, from education, and all these things have been to keep us from being able to thrive. They're
and
just such a
and
fear,
and Mr.
such a
and
fear
Mr.
of that.
Scott, if you, I think this, the young man that you're talking about, if it wasn't him, it was another gentleman that was born in one of the islands, had only learned to play football since he was 18 years old. He didn't
Yeah,
know what a football was,
yeah.
but
There's tons of examples. I have a friend that had a master's degree psychologist, and he grew up in Cleveland, and he never played basketball. He's 6'9". He went to Stout State in Wisconsin and got his master's degree as a psychologist. And the coach saw how big he was. He taught him how to play basketball. He had never played basketball at all. This guy was so good, he was drafted by an NBA team playing on a little Rudy Poo school in Wisconsin. I mean, so that's, I mean, we have the talent and we have to really somehow, it looks like it's going to be on us to do this, to bring this out, because they are going to continue to
no,
suppress.
see, I don't think it's on us. I think, Dr. Casey, I think it's on you.
How is it on me?
Well, because you're the one that has to have the job. It's it's evident that we either didn't have enough sense, enough knowledge, or something kept us from breaking through this ceiling. Something made us, when we get to a certain point, say, "Stop. We're here. Our destination is now." How do you break that cycle, Dr. Casey?
You mean me as in my generation?
Yes.
Um, well, we've already broken that ceiling. We've
How?
gone we've gone farther and have pushed a lot of boundaries that other generations have yet to push. It just looked different than what makes you all comfortable.
No, but your generation has let Roe v. A decline of Roe v. Wade.
How did we do that when it's people that is in your generation that's put in that position to do so? Our
Because
generation didn't do shit.
right,
That's that
the,
that's
the
that's
the
that's
point
that
is,
denial over there.
no, the point is, why the hell didn't you put us out? If a person is leading you
You
into
you you
hold
continue
on, hold on, hold on. If I
'cause you do
grab
this
your
all the
hand,
time. Nope,
hold
nope,
on.
you
If
do
I
this
grab your
all the
hand,
time.
if I grab your hand and try to lead you into a fire, you gonna say, "Oh,
James,
let go of me."
your
So
ass is always trying to blame somebody for some shit that we ain't got
no,
goddamn
I'm not.
control over.
I'm not trying to
You
blame.
blaming people that we ain't get the same
I'm
way your generation ain't have control over, and we talk about the same shit, the same topic right here. That there are old people that's in office with nobody running against them. And because those old ass people are in office with nobody running against them and things like the Supreme Court, that just you just can't just put somebody in there. That's not how that works. So stop pointing the finger and take responsibility for what are you doing right now that's gonna make a difference. Because I didn't have matter of fact, I watched the Roe versus Wade thing happen while we was on last week. How did I have some effect in that? What was I going to do? What was my generation going to do about that? Not a goddamn thing. We
vote us
we ain't
out.
put it in place. We ain't
Vote
put it
us
in place
out. Don't keep
for
voting the
who?
same people
For
in.
who voted in the Supreme Court?
No, we voted. We
Who
voted
voted
in it.
in the Supreme Court, people?
45.
Who-
So quit
Well,
blaming people that have absolutely not a goddamn thing to do with what's going on for what's going on. We ain't got no control over the Supreme Court and what they decide to do or not to do.
Right, but hold
Individual state has different laws and we don't control those either. Because guess what? No matter what we want to be put in place, somebody has to present that law for it to be voted on. If nobody presents the law, then it's not just going to come out of thin air. That's not how it works. And it does
right.
not matter. It does not matter how well crafted a campaign is and somebody saying what they're going to do. Even when they get in office, it still has to go through the chain of command. So if the chain of command say, "Oh, that's what you're trying to do. We don't like that. We ain't doing that." Then guess what? It's going to go back.
So are you telling me that my great grandchildren will still be talking about the same thing that I'm talking about today?
If you don't do nothing but talk about it, yeah.
It's the same thing. The topic is the same thing. Like I say, my grandparents, my grandmother, I mean, she did what they call day work. In other words, she cleaned people's houses. Okay. And they didn't allow her to go to school in Talladega. She said they had a school, but it burned down. In the school that they wanted them to go, they had to walk. And as she said, I had to get up for a day. I had to walk all the way. And so they just worked. And so because she never had any opportunity to even go to school, wanted to go to school. Same with my grandfather. He wanted to be an engineer. Now, he could actually drive the trains because when they were there at the state at the grounds where they had to repair them and everything, he would move the train around like it was nothing. He say move that train over here. He could actually do it, but he never would never get opportunity to do that. Would never get any opportunities to do that. And so this is what has, like I say, this is what and as soon as we get somewhere, here they come. Here they come. They're always watching this. They're always watching. And we really were making strides when we left cities because the war was going on and they needed people to work. And the automobile industry was booming, and that created tons of jobs, tons of things for people to do. But then that dies out. What replaces it? I mean, so we're always kind of at the bottom of these things where we're trying to always survive. It becomes the first thing that we have to do is survive. You couldn't buy houses. If you could, you couldn't live in certain areas because everything was redlined. This is around the country. This is the federal government that's doing this. They wouldn't give you FHA loans. They wouldn't give the veterans loans. See, all these things, the government is complicit in this stuff.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, how you get around that? Um, ah, I mean, we're still seeking those answers.
Uh, Dr. Case, did you find when you got your house that your first home that you were restricted to a certain area,
No,
even with a VA loan?
no. When I built both of my homes
Oh,
and
okay.
I didn't have any type of uh problems with it.
Okay. Well,
It was fairly easy.
yeah, yeah. But you built. You didn't go out and buy somebody else's. So your circumstances were a little bit different. Uh, but that was another thing. That we still haven't made any changes in the VA system.
I mean, I think that the changes that need to be made right now they are streamlining some stuff. It's just the way that things are handled more so than the efficiency of the processing system. Because you're getting people in those positions oftentimes that they act like the money is coming out of their pocket. They act like, like it's gonna hurt them. if somebody get approved or if somebody get a win a claim, all of these things are coming from people that feel like, well, this person should be able to, without knowing that person. A lot of times uh, veterans are just discredited. So and it's crazy because although veterans are not only black, it's a large number of black people, and they end up a little bit less. I don't want to say they treat it less, but yeah, because when you black, you have a harder time getting your benefits. You just have a harder time getting the services that you need. But in general, they make it hard to get benefits, and that part should not be.
Oh yeah, I can tell you some horror stories about trying to get benefits. Yeah,
I
but
mean, I fought this fight of getting benefits for myself by myself. I've never had an attorney to do my benefits or anything like that because I always felt like who could represent me better than me. But I also did work study. I was a work study at the VA for like a year and a half, maybe 2 years. During the first part, I was a work study in the education department and auditing like the GI Bill, stuff like that. But then on the second part, I was a work study for the DAV. So I did a lot of questions and answer with understanding how to work a claim. So I kind of came up with a system on doing claims that has been effective thus far. It's just having the persistence even when they say no, because normally they say no a couple of times, even when they should say yes.
a few
Well,
times.
isn't it easier? Isn't it easier if you have a disability? I mean, if you have a percentage or you have a disability, isn't it easier to access some of those veteran services?
The problem is it's hard to get the disability compensation awarded in most cases. Like unless you are well, no,
Wounded, unless you have an
unless
act, yeah, unless you're wounded.
well,
If
no, I would say the veterans that's coming out now are mostly wartime veterans. So they'll probably have a little bit easier time getting 100% or
Yeah,
getting permanent
yeah,
and total,
yeah,
because they're
yeah,
all Iraq, Afghan veterans. So everybody got PTSD. Like you can't get out of
yeah,
there without that.
yeah.
But
good,
um,
good luck to them because I'm still at 80%.
I
45
mean,
years later, good luck to
it once you get to like 80%, it is definitely a little bit more difficult, but you just got to find the claims that actually are easy to prove. So if you got a problem, every time you go to the doctor, if there is a new problem that arises, you got to see if it can be service connected, because a lot of times they can be.
them.
Now,
Well,
whether or not you are persistent about how to go about doing your claim is a whole nother thing, because you got to make sure you're going to the doctor. You got to make sure that you like being a disabled veteran is a job.
it is.
But
You know, I mean,
do they look at it from the standpoint of, see, I used to do workers' comp, and I
Mhm,
actually had a business, and that's what I did. I worked with people, injured workers. I was also a vocational expert for the Office of Social Security Hearings and Appeals. So, in other words, people that apply for Social Security disability, I'm the vocational person that has to say what their employability is.
mhm,
And
mhm.
so, is that, and I never really worked with much veteran type things. I've had an opportunity to do some things with that, but does that, the disability rules in veteran, does it have to do with not being able to work, or do they actually look at the percentage of disability you have from whatever incurred during your time in the service, or is
Okay,
it tied to
so
the fact to where you can work or not?
it's a little bit of both. Depending on what the disability is. Sometimes it can
Mm.
be a matter of your functionality, but some disabilities you can prove that you are more functional at sometimes than others. So they have a scale. I get both. So, with Social Security, they're looking at your total inability to work. With
Right, right,
VA, they look at the disabilities individually, and then it kind of adds up to whatever your total compensation will be. So, I got migraines. So your migraines is rated at a certain percent. Where Social Security, they look at your overall, and then they take the opinions of the doctors to see what they think your overall is
right,
and your capability and
right.
functionality. With
Because
the
with Social
VA,
Security,
it's how much does each disability that you have affect your ability to work. So you might have one disability, my knees. I got 10% for my knee. I done had four knee surgeries, 10%. That's it. But when I go and look at other things, I might have higher percentages for a different disability. So all of those is called your combined rating. So if you have 10 disabilities, if you can have three disabilities with 0%, and that's just they don't think that those things limit you. But then you might have two or three disabilities with 80%, but that don't mean that you're gonna get 80% though, because once you add them together, it can be like 60%. It's a weird VA math. It's some government, you know what I'm
but
saying,
what is the
trickery.
percent? What is the percent based on? Is it based on what you would have made if you were still in the service?
No, no.
No,
What's
So
it
okay,
no,
based
no,
so
on?
no.
so there's a chart, and with the chart, it starts at 0 and it goes from 0 to 100 by tens on one way, and 0 to 100 I think by ones or tens the other way. And then so if you get a rating for 10%, then you're going to be on the 10% bracket. But then if you get a rating for 20%, then you got to go down and match the 10% with the 20% to find the number where your percentage is going to be. So it that number takes you back down to, so let's say you get a 20% and a 30%, and instead of it being 50%, because 20 plus 30 is 50, it'll be
But
40%.
but does
So then,
each percent?
whoa, let me finish. Let me finish
Okay,
explaining for
okay,
other
okay.
veterans to understand too. So now, if you got the 30% and then you got the 10%, it's not gonna be 50%, even though that's 50. It's gonna be like 40%. So now you got to go to the 40% bracket, and then your next percentage will be done the same way. So now you got to come to the point. It's like it would be frustrating for a person that is not a math type person, it's not a numbers person, because it's a lot of
Yeah.
grafting. So if you 40 and then you got a 30, then you think it's gonna be 70, but it's really
No.
gonna be 60.
And by the time you get to 60, it might be 42, if you're
Right.
lucky.
And then once you get to 70 though, you can't get like a 30% or 40% to get to 100. You got
No.
to get like a 70% to get to 100 once you get to like 70,
You,
80,
you,
and 90.
you get to
But so is
70.
each percent a dollar amount, or is each percent? I mean, just
It's
I
just it's a chart. So the chart tells you so after you look at the combined rating, there's a pay chart. So every 10% got a certain pay chart, 20% got a certain pay chart, and then they round it to the highest 10.
does it have to do with your rank? You know,
No.
like if you're a captain, if you're
No.
Mm, 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 mm.
it has nothing to do with that. Okay.
No, it has nothing to do. It's nothing like Social Security in that sense.
Yeah. Okay.
It
Okay.
is simply a payment for you being disabled, based on your military service. So it's kind of like severance long term, or like the long term disability, basically.
Yeah, it's
It
like workers' comp. It's actually more like workers' comp in a way, at
It,
least the
I
way
it's
mean,
it, it's more like SSI than it is workman's
the
comp.
act- oh,
Okay. Okay.
Uh, but
Uh,
it's
but see, but Social
it
Security is if you can't work. That's the whole thing. You can
well,
get Social Security disability if you can't work. And so
no,
but
now,
no.
but you can work though.
We're
With
talking
severance,
about. You were asking about the system, what it was close to.
right.
Okay.
The way the
No,
Okay.
but
system is run is closer to the way SSI is run than it is workman's comp.
Then workers
but
comp.
but
Okay.
technically, you can get Social Security disability and still work. You just can't work over a certain threshold.
Right.
Technically.
Right,
Right.
right,
Now, I
right.
wouldn't
But
chance it
but
because it's very
but
sensitive.
workman's comp, if you're found working, or you can be discontinued. You're still
Yeah,
Right.
but
allowed.
usually those cases will get settled with a percentage of disability. They call it permanent partial or permanent total. And it'll be settled. They'll pay you so long until you go to court and the judge adjudicates the damn thing.
Yeah,
Well, with the VA, you can get permanent and total, and then they will never come back and take away your disability unless it's a case of fraud or something.
yeah.
So they don't reevaluate it or anything. Say you
After you get
recovered.
permanent total, no,
No, no,
it's
no,
it's
no.
secure. And with permanent total, you get your children get education benefits, so they'll be able to
Ooh,
go and get I believe it's
ooh,
associate's degree at minimum.
really?
And
Wow.
medical benefits, it's you get to get back on base with the commissary, so you get your ID. It's a lot of benefits that come with being permanent and total. Of course, housing and all of those things. But if it was up to me, if I had the ability to request something or make a suggestion that actually came to fruition, I would suggest that every wartime veteran get at least $500 food stamps monthly, just because why not? Y'all
Mm.
giving able-bodied people getting food stamps, um, but veterans sometimes struggle to get food, and I think that wartime veterans should get that. I think that if you not just well, all 100% veterans, and then if you're a wartime veteran, you should get a little bit more.
But also, I also think that there should be no such thing as a homeless veteran. We used to
Mm.
have old soldiers home. Don't have that no more. Yeah. So there are a lot of things that the military does give, and but there are but it's not like you don't earn them. you know, um, so but kind of getting back on the subject of what you know because Dr. Casey, I'm once again, COVID is in the headlines. Now, there is an argument that post COVID, black men are actually getting paid less than their white counterparts. Usually 75 cents to a dollar. Uh, 75 cents for the black man, $1 for the white guy. Now, you know, it, and this is not meant to be a racist show. We're not, like saying that you know, all white people are devils or this, that, or the other. That's not the point. The point is maybe if we can keep pointing out these disparities, we can open some eyes. And believe me, if you look back on the history of this show, you can see there are a couple of times that I invited conservatives on the show. And not only were they conservatives, but they were white
Oh, I thought
conservatives.
that was your word for
No, 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 because I actually had one, no, I had two. I take that back. I had two black men that called themselves conservatives to actually come on the show. One his family, he has a family business, been in his family for generations. He lives in St. Louis. According to him, he builds bridges, so forth and so on. The other gentleman was an African gentleman, and he was telling me how we, meaning the people, the black people that were already here, always wanted a handout. We were never uh, uh, energetic enough to achieve things on our own. We lived, or we were recipients of a welfare state. Now, I pointed out to him, according to numbers, I mean, and it would make sense since there are disproportionately a number of Caucasian people on this United States of America as compared to minorities, black and brown people, that it would make sense that there would be more white people on the rolls of welfare than there would be black people. But somehow, every time you hear this Republican rhetoric, you hear about the welfare state and how much we depend upon that welfare state. Dr. Casey, you brought about food stamps. I mean, uh, according to them, there are no white people on food stamps.
I mean, well, they are the ones that's doing most of the fraud. They the ones doing most of the fraud. You seen all the busts that come with that welfare fraud be a large group of white people. I don't know why, but see, but that is also goes back to when I say that I don't believe that we are the true minority. I think that that is a verbiage game that they play like they do with everything else, and then they say certain things a certain type of way to make it seem like something that is not for their own gratification. And think about the media. Think about the way a lot of things are portrayed in the news. When somebody of color is arrested or dies, let's say they die a tragic death, versus somebody that's white is arrested or dies, the presentation that is going to be given to us is going to be vastly different. If somebody white is arrested and they done shot up a school, you're gonna get the best picture that they got available. If somebody is black is arrested for not even somebody black being arrested, if somebody black is killed, they're still gonna get a mugshot. And that is the presentation that we are given. So when we hear things like minority, I don't believe that we're minority. I think that we outnumber them. I think that we don't they don't want us to know that. And as long that we are unaware that we are everything that we are as black people. I mean, and I say it like that because I don't want to say like we're superhuman or anything like that, but we definitely have a lot of things that make other people fear us for just being us. I mean, we could be as peaceful and as giving and as loving as we want to be, and they will still fear us. And there's a reason for that. So when you talk about minorities, I don't believe that we are a minority. I believe that we are the majority, or that the numbers are flawed and presented away like how you talk about COVID. When they present COVID cases, they don't present the people that survived and recovered. They never talk about that fucking number, and that number is huge. That's like it's like a 96 or 97%
Doctor
survival.
Dr. Casey, you never in war. You never talk about the number of people that survived. You only talk about the
But the
KIAs.
point though, like what I'm saying is that they amplify the things that they want you to see for a reason. They're not doing it for it's not for no reason. And because they do that, it makes me very hesitant to believe anything that they say to make us believe that we are not more than what we are presented to be.
Well, the reason why I said the majority is because if you accept that you are the majority and majority rules, then you also have to accept that responsibility. So, therefore, if you're going to say that you are the majority, then you have to have the majority of numbers.
Nah,
Yeah.
that's not necessarily true because again, we're dealing with a democracy that is broken. Now, it's not broken because it was made to be this way. It's working exactly the way they wanted it to be. So you can't say it's a minority or a majority when nothing is accurate. Voting ain't accurate. The citizenship ain't accurate. The jobs ain't accurate. It's a lot of inaccuracies when you're dealing with the systematic approach of government and just the functionality of our country. It's a lot of inaccuracies. It's a not only a lot of inaccuracies. There is nobody really watching over the big guy. And guess what? They ain't gonna police themselves. So we gonna get whatever they're gonna give us, and it'll be hard to really change that portion of it because you can't just change your whole system overnight, and it's gonna take a lot of strategy to come up with a way to do it in which that won't destroy those who attempt to make those changes.
Well, that's
Mr. Scott?
interesting that you say
Yeah.
voting, because the voting piece is really, I think, is a very interesting the way they're handling these things now. We had a guest, a gentleman, a medical doctor actually, that's running for governor of the state of Minnesota, Republican, last week. And his big thing was that all these elections are fraudulent. That
Mhm.
that the whole system of elections is, and my response to him was, I mean, don't you have to be 18 to vote? Don't you have to be a citizen to vote? Don't you? I mean, aren't some of these things written in written in stone what it takes to be able to vote in this country? And then I asked him about, James's, he's always, questioned the John Lewis Voting Act. Why are they so afraid of that when that basically, as I read it, it says just do what you said you were going to do with voting. I mean, it's like, and so
In my
now then we finish this, they keep changing the jurisdictions, they keep changing the areas of voting, they change the population areas. And here again, and people say I pick on the Somalis. I mean, but they come in and vote with these names, and everybody has the same birth date, and I mean, are they citizens? Don't you have to be a citizen to vote? And I mean, he really railed on the fact that our elections now are not trustworthy.
mm-mm. They aren't. Just when you think about the census, everybody doesn't do a census. And then two, the accuracy of the census is subjective. I mean, I've looked at some of the old census from the 1900s, early 1900s, 18 late 1800s, and they're subjective because if somebody puts the wrong thing in the census system, then it's off. And then how many of those numbers are inaccurately documented? Um, and then when you talk about the voting, it goes back to tracking and a full accountability because if you allow all these people to register to vote, then them real numbers start coming out. And those real numbers will show something different than what we've been told for so long. You got to think that everything that we've been given thus far is created and structured to support the narrative of history that they gave us. So if everything is made to support that narrative of history, it's going to be hard to get them to make the necessary changes because they don't want to. The critical race thinking is not unfolding the history that they've given us. They don't want to. They don't want the truth to be told. And the only reason that you wouldn't want the truth to be told is if it's going to unravel everything that you've worked on.
But Dr. Casey, if you cannot believe the numbers, if you cannot believe in the system, which I'm trying to figure out. Okay, what is the purpose of voting? Because now, from the way that you were saying,
Mhm.
my vote doesn't count. So I could just sit here in the house.
I mean, technically speaking, voting in a presidential election, for the presidency, it really doesn't count because the electoral college is gonna do whatever the fuck they want to do. We
Well,
just can't
well,
win.
well, okay.
Locally,
Yeah, okay, yeah.
locally,
Well, the,
um, what you was about to say, Mr.
No,
Scott?
no,
well, I
no.
was going to say that the problem that seems to be coming out now at more is tied to what they're saying, these absentee ballots, these absentee where people are out of the country, they're in the service, they work somewhere, they are sick and shut-ins, as they used to say in church,
Mr. Scott,
and they can
mail,
vote
Okay,
still.
now
we had mail-in voting since what was it
yeah.
the the North and the South. Wasn't that the first mail-in voting that
But
we
I mean,
had
that seems to be something
in
that
the
what they're
Civil War?
really using and attacking as something that is making these elections untenable to actually
Well,
get accurate counts.
again, when you talk about local voting has a better accountability rating, but however, to go with that, to add to and erase it, um, when you talk about the accuracy of the numbers, stopping people from voting lets you know that there is a number deficit that they are trying to limit with how many black people are eligible to vote, how many black people are registered to vote, and how much change can come if black people really rallied around a topic, a person, and a narrative in which we can move forward in.
See, now maybe things are different in Georgia and where you live, Mr. Scott, but here in California and I believe Ohio too. But I've been gone away from Ohio for a couple generations, so but I know here in California, if you get food stamps, if you get any type of, if you're homeless, there's two things that you have to have if you're homeless. Number one, and you get them free out here. Number one is an ID card, at which time they also give you a little thing, whether or not you can register to vote if you're a citizen. So they give you an ID card and they give you a food stamp card. So there's no reason, the Republican thing was, well, everybody has to have ID. Well, you have to have ID in order for you to get benefits from the state. You have to have a state ID. So the numbers, even for the homeless, are supposedly there. So how do you get from this, to this John Lewis Act where, now the amendment has been made where you have to have voter ID, but as you say, Mr. Scott, you have to live here. You can't mail in a vote. Suppose you're in a hospital. You can't have a ballot box where all your votes are gathered and then taken. There are so many restrictions, but the main thing was voter ID. And Mr. Scott, is in Minnesota, is it required for you to have a state ID if you don't have a driver's license?
I believe it is. I
What
believe
about
it
in
is.
Georgia, Dr. Casey?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. So once again, I come to you, Mr. Scott, when you asked the gentleman about the John Lewis Rights Act, Voting Act, and did he bring up the thing about IDs?
No, no. He was just really fixated on uh, and how
There's a
this
difference
system is
between
broken and how the election system is really broken. I mean, and I don't. He didn't have a solution, and that's another thing about some of these politicians when they come in. Okay, we know a lot of these things are not where they should be, but I want to hear solutions from some of these people.
but there is a difference between a law or it being mandated to have something and the actual people getting what they're being told to have. It's just like saying, um, making people go and get background checks for guns is gonna stop criminals. No, because criminals ain't getting no goddamn background check to begin with. They going to getting their guns illegally. They ain't going to the store to get the guns to do no crime. I mean, not the smart ones.
Dr. Casey, I believe I can walk in any major city in the United States and have a gun within 15 minutes if I want one.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. The thought process of something being a law does not mean that that's what's going to be enforced. Oftentimes, when you make things legal or illegal, it kind of determines how people will handle those things moving forward. Most people want to buck the system, so they're gonna do whatever bucks the system.
I'm hoping we get honeybees supposed to come in tonight. Like I was saying, I was hoping that I would have more women on the panel. But let's get your interpretation. See, as soon as right there, okay, right on time.
I'm
Humblebee, how are you doing this evening?
He
I'm
done
good.
said,
How about you
right
guys?
on up, girl.
Oh, by the way, we all have to say happy birthday to Brother Robert. Today is his birthday.
Whoop, whoop.
So uh, I didn't ask him how old he was, but I think Mr. Scott, somewhere he's out there writing a rap song right now. But
That sounds like he was rapping rap song for his birthday.
Humblebee, how are you doing this evening?
I'm pretty good. How about you guys?
Well,
Good, good.
Good.
Um, I feel a little uncomfortable, like I said, talking about this Roe versus Wade thing. Roe, because personally, as I've always said, I do not feel that men, and this was virtually five men deciding the fate of women for the next however many years might be, this they overturned a 50-year law, so this, might be another however long these men last, because the Supreme Court is a lifetime position. So we have to wait for at least three of these five people to die before we get a different point of view in the Supreme Court. Um, or the Democrats have to start packing the Supreme Court, which they do not have the votes to do. But when you first heard about this so called leaked report, Humblebee, what did you think?
I was trying to do a little bit of research to get more information. I know that they're of course trying to figure out who it was that leaked it, and of course everyone's looking straight at the wife. Um, I honestly feel like it's possibly an inside job, someone who fears actually saying what they really feel. So they decided to just go ahead and leak it instead of speaking up.
Well, I mean, you have to kind of think, and this is just a criminal mind thinking once again, but the judge, your wife supports 45 and insurrection. She thought that the election was rigged and that 45 actually leaked it. You're at home sick with your law briefs, maybe in your law office, maybe beside your bed, But are we going to think that she's not going to look in these briefs or whatever is directed there when she's already stated her opinion? So I'm not, I'm just, going according to, as they say on TV, the usual suspects. But Dr. Dr. Casey, what's your thoughts on this? And why would a man leak it out? I mean, why would a man leak it out if it wasn't a woman?
I think that it's great that it was leaked. Again, I seen it while we was in the show last week. Right at the end is when it started
Right.
rolling out. And I wanted to bring it up, but I didn't want to extend the show. So, so I didn't. But I think that it's interesting. I am pro life, but pro choice. I think that um abortion is subjective to whomever is considering it. They have to live with that for the rest of their lives. I don't think that men should have the ability to speak or vote on a matter that they don't really participate in, aside from their little sperm.
That's not
But
totally.
uh,
That's not totally
Wait,
true.
wait,
That's
wait,
not
wait.
totally
Hold on,
true.
hold on, hold on, Mr. Scott. Let her finish. I'm gonna come to you because I got something for you too. But go ahead, Miss. Go ahead, Dr. Casey.
but I think that ending this would definitely make people be more responsible with sex. I definitely think that there is some things that um, not having that option on the table could be, I don't want to say beneficial because people are not going to like that I'm saying this, but it's a certain type of responsibility that comes when you know you can't just go have an abortion. And I've known people that have had several, um, but uh, that was their choice. So I think that choice should be an option. But I don't know how to feel about it. I can't have no more kids. I think that with my daughter, whenever she decides to have children in the way long, long
Yeah.
time she just turned 12. She got a long time. But when it comes to that time, I think that she should be able to make a choice. It's difficult because you get women that seek to get impregnated by somebody that don't want to get them pregnant. And men don't have enough say so over the process. In the sense of, if I'm the father and you decide to run off and have an abortion, I should have to say so in that process. But that's not the case. So it is, I don't know, it's interesting. I like to watch things like this play out.
Now, Mr. Scott, I know you were getting ready to say a couple of things there, but there was something that I thought about that was very interesting because one of the states, I believe was Mississippi, said that if a woman aborts a child, it would be murder. So, Mr. Scott, as the sperm donor, would you be an accomplice to murder?
Well, all I can speak to these things is personal experiences. When we had our second son, my wife we got the ultrasound and we could see, and the doctor's like, well, if I can see what I need to see, I can tell you if it's a boy or a girl. And I said, well, if I can see what I need to see, I mean, I got to pay you for this information. If I can see what I see, I can tell if it's a boy or a girl. And so it turned out to be Bryson, my main man, my second son. And so I told baby, I said, no, really, we need to have a girl. And so let's have a girl. And she said, nope. I said, well, why? We can try. We can try. Nope, it's too late. And so that decision had been made. Okay, it wasn't really. and I believe that the women choose. I believe the women pick. I believe the women pick the man they want to be with. I believe the women pick. And this is such a hard type of a thing. There's something that just came up in the paper here of a woman that they two of her kids went missing after a year or two, and they found both of the kids in the Mississippi River, and now she's arrested for murdering her kids. And you would think that there could have been a different outcome for this, that there could have been something better than her throwing her kids into the Mississippi River. So this is something that I think women choose. And I mean, I think that this is something that I think women are equipped to do this. And I think it goes back to the thing of historically where these white men have always thought women, they can't vote, they can't do this, they need to be this, they need to be that. And I think that none of that's true. I don't believe any of that. I was raised by a great mother, great grandmothers, her sisters. All those women were tremendous, tremendous, without any opportunity to do things. And so I think it's pretty basic that the women should be able to make the choice, and they should be able to make an informed choice and be able to have medical care, to talk to a professional, and go ahead and make that. I think it should be to the women to make that choice.
But Humblebee, I mean, what do you think? All these states are making these laws, telling you what women can't do with their bodies. Should men also be held responsible? Like I said, if you impregnate a woman that has an abortion, should the man be charged as an accomplice to murder?
The
No,
way that I feel is so I've seen so many situations pan out. I am someone who really wanted kids from the time I became, as soon as I graduated high school, I knew for a fact that I wanted to be a mom, um, despite what people think when they look at me or not. And when I found out that I had to get a hysterectomy, there was no other options because of my medical conditions. It made me sad, and I see so many women out here who have babies and they treat them so awful because they didn't want them. I actually know of a situation right now where there's a baby in the hospital and the mom is just like, well, I can't deal with it. No one told him to get sick. And it's just like, and the reason why she has him is because her family, their religion, she was not allowed to get an abortion. And they told her, if you go get an abortion, we will disown you. So now she's in a situation where she hates this baby. And I'm sitting there looking like, there's people like me out here who want kids. But then I also feel that when you have the people out there are who told her you cannot get an abortion, but now she hates this baby and none of them want to take the baby. So it's a really confusing situation. When I sit there and I look at it, I feel that a woman should have a choice. But then also I understand that there are people out here who will see you get an abortion and they're just like, well, you're getting an abortion. I don't even have the option of having a child. So I kind of play devil's advocate when it comes to this situation because I understand where every single person comes from. But I feel that you know because a group feels that you shouldn't get abortions doesn't mean that you have a right to take that right away from people who do feel that you should be able to get abortions. As far as will a man be an accomplice to murder, if you are out there having unprotected sex and you know that you don't want a child, why can't you get a vasectomy? That's reversible.
Ah, there you go. There you go. Dr. Casey, I got to ask you, I mean, because Humblebee makes a very good point here. In a lot of these states, they don't even make an exception for rape or incest. And I can't imagine, a woman, and as I've said, I got seven sisters. I can't imagine them having to raise a child that was a product of rape.
Well, there was a time where they kept it in the family, in more aspects than one, where literally you just marry a couple generations down in order to keep the
Your second,
bloodline.
your second cousin or your third
Right.
cousin.
You marry a little bit down the bloodline in order for your babies not to be defective. But
See, I can tell you from Ohio. We used to call them West Virginia weddings, and I know you heard that before. Go
so
ahead.
so that is something that was actually a thing. It's in the Bible, the same type, you know what I'm saying, of thing. But I my problem is, how do we have so much say so over what other people do with their lives in the first place? It is my life. Why do I have to get, but it's the same thing. Why do I need to get approval to be a human being? And it is in so many aspects, but it's the same thing. Um, just it's a lot of regulations to keep us contained. When I think about even paying for water, um, or electricity, or like the things that we need. Like, why do we have to pay for water and it's a necessity? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's certain things that don't make sense to me, because it's like the capitalism is so overwhelming that it's pathetic.
And
But
paying for air will be next. So
I mean, if they find a way to do it, yeah, you'll have clean air buildings where you have to go in, and this is a building that only provides you with clean air, and
They've
they will
already
find a
showed
way
us
to
I
do
guess
it.
none of y'all have seen any of these old people walking around with oxygen tanks, right?
I mean, yeah, same thing.
don't,
But the
don't,
thing
don't think
about,
don't think that they walking around with them free tanks.
I mean, no, but even so, like, even when I think about virtual reality and what they're doing with the metaverse right now, we're going into a stage where people will be able to avoid reality at all costs. Um, I'm glad that it started after the pandemic, because if this would have been going on in the height of the pandemic, it would have been crazy. You would have never have gotten people out of their house. So I am kind of curious to see what pans out, but overall, we it's too much on what I can do as a human being, like whether it's sexuality, whether it's spirituality, all of these things are ruled by people that have no say so. What's normal, what's not normal. Like, as a human, we are all different. Your mental capacity is going to be different than my mental capacity, because we're two different people. The way you think, the way you move, the way you function, everything will be different. And we are limiting people on what is allowed. Well, like, how much of a human can I be? Like, can I be this much human or that much human? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to be too much human for you.
uh,
I, I think that
I'll give you a statistic here, Mister Scott, before you expound a little
yeah,
bit. 38 states in the union have a law against sodomy and fellatio. If we don't enforce those laws, how are we supposed to all of a sudden suppose it's to enforce a law that limits what a woman can do with her body? We don't check to see whether her husband is doing one of those other two acts. So how can we enforce this particular act?
But wait, because let's add
Okay,
into
yeah.
that. We got to add into that the fact that right
See,
now there are still very limited laws when it comes to the age of a person to get married. You can still get married at 12, 13, 14, 15 years old in some places. So they're very subjective. They're very peekaboo when it comes to what's good and what's not good.
yeah. Mr. Scott, we talked about some of those 35-year-old grandmothers, right?
we have. But my ultimate thing on this topic, having been a counselor and child protection, social supervisor, you don't want the courts to make decisions in your life. unless it's absolutely necessary. You know, situations like my brother had a stroke. He's incapacitated at 55 years old, getting ready to retire from Xerox, just, built his own house with his own hands, build cars. And so we had to go to court to have power of attorney. And so my sister's like, well, let's both be power of attorney so we can do it. I said, no, uh-uh. If you want to, you do it, and we'll support you all the way. But we're not going to let this turn into a situation where we're going to be at each other's throats about this. You're going to make the decision, and we're going to live with it. And if you any questions you have, we'll help you as much as we can to do it. And my thing with the same thing with the having children, to stay out of the courts. If it's They only should be there as a last resort. They need to be there if, say, someone leaves a child on a doorstep or something like that, and they need to get legal authority to do it. But when you continue, if you let the courts make decisions, they're not going to do this thing, even though they have psychologists, they have their supposedly people there. But my thing is, as Dr. Casey was saying, we as people, we used to do these things within the family. We used to figure a way to do these kind of things, and I still think the family needs to be involved in the courts. I mean, as less involvement with the courts as you can have. That's what I say in my life. I don't want anything to do with. I run my ranch, or I'll wreck it. I'm in charge here. I sail the ship, and the
Yeah,
ship
but
don't
but
sail.
when you decide to wreck it and sink the ship, that's when the courts get involved.
But I'm just saying, the courts are, to me, are a last resort. The people should be able to figure out what
that
they
that's
need to do.
that's not realistic. Just
I
if
think
you
it
look
is.
at no, when you look at the times now, the reason why it's not is because you're talking about um people that's dealing with more mental health problems than ever before. You're talking about people that's dealing with more type of abuse that's out and in the open than ever before. People not ashamed to talk about it.
You froze up on us, Dr. Casey.
Goes up. Yeah, because I'm right. In the courts, we don't want them to make decisions. You don't know who these judges are. You don't know how thorough these people are. No, I've said that that's a last resort. If you have to go to court to make these decisions, that to me that's a last resort. I think the family can get together and make some of these decisions.
You
I
are
think
not
that
right
there are
because
other people in the
my
family.
screen froze.
There's
Huh?
grandmothers, there's sisters, there's other people in families that can make these decisions. It doesn't have to be by the
go,
court.
go ahead, Dr. Casey.
A,
Go
a
ahead, Dr.
technical
Casey.
a technical issue does not make you right, Mr. Scott.
but
um,
but see,
I-
it's funny that you say that because I remember the trauma of custody trials.
Yes.
I can tell you the judge that sat on the bench for my first two, it was Judge Beckenbaugh. And the judge had been there. I don't know. I think at my last he had been there for 15 to 20 years in the same spot, domestic family court. When I came back and when I went to family court in New Jersey and ended up getting in a foster home, it was the same thing, except that because I was being sent to a quote unquote foster church home, there was also a question of how much they were going to be paid in order for them to take me into this home. There had to be, I had to, in other words, I had to get a scholarship to go to a foster home.
yeah, that foster system is a payout for a lot of people. A lot of people are not getting these kids because they want them kids. They getting them kids because
Thank
them kids
you.
come with a check.
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, I had thought about it before, but I just don't want to be on. I ain't got the type of time. not for that reason. I need to do it because I really want to do it, and my children need to be a certain age so that I can feel like whoever comes into my home won't be overly influential to my children.
But Humble B, one of the things that were written in this opinion was that it had to do with adoptions and the fact that people were going elsewhere to adopt kids because of the low domestic infant supply. So when you start calling, I mean, if you're calling children a supply, you sell supplies.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, so what are you writing into this opinion?
When it comes to that, so I saw this video. It was a while back, and this woman, she walked up to a group of people protesting outside of Planned Parenthood, and she asked them, she was like, how many of you guys have adopted a child? None of them adopted a child. And my thing when it comes to that, like, of course, everyone wants to get an infant. They want to raise that baby from the beginning. But there's so many kids sitting in the foster system right now. And like you guys just mentioned, a lot of people are only doing it for the money. Um, I have a cousin who's in the foster system right now. I've called and I've asked, well, where is she? I need to know, like, or what steps do I need to take so that I could at least take over? And they don't care about that. They haven't called back, and it's when you sit there and you say that there's a low supply of infants, that right there is just kind of like it makes me it makes me wonder, especially when it goes back to the reason why they put Planned Parenthoods in black neighborhoods was to wipe out the black community because they felt that the black community was stupid. So now you guys are saying there's a low supply, and when it comes to adoptions that are not through the county, you are basically paying for a child. You have to pay all these fees, and so you're basically purchasing a child. So that when it comes to that aspect, and when they're saying, like, we want to get rid of this altogether, no matter what your situation is, that's when I start to wonder, okay, so is this modern day
Ah,
slave trade?
when I just tell you, I just wrote down slave trade on here. I'm telling you, I just wrote that down. It is a slave damn trade. That's
It's a
exactly
modern day
what it
slave trade. You guys are low on supplies. We were
is.
considered supplies, and now you guys are using these words again, and it's starting to, it gets people who are actually paying attention, who actually really study and keep their mind open. It makes you start to, your wheels start to turn, and you're like, okay, well, what do you mean you're low on supplies of infants?
uh, uh, Mr. Scott, before I ask you this question, are you still employed by Child Services?
No, no, no. I
Okay,
retired from that.
okay. Did you have a certain quota when you were in Child Services?
No, no, we didn't. And again, I kind of ran my thing where I always looked for relatives when we got to cases of, see, when you get to a case and it gets to a point where you have to terminate a person's rights and have a trial, and and what you're saying in those type cases is this parent can never ever safely parent this child ever. But that may or may not be true. It may or may not be true. They may not be able to do it at that time, in their life. I actually had people call me when I was on coverage. The lady calls me and says, I just want to know how my son is doing. He was taken away from me. I've got another son now, and I'm working, and things are going good. Can you just tell me? I said, well, I can't really give you any information other than I'm sure, the child is being taken care of. And I referred her to a legal aid to see if there's something she can do. But these things are just, I mean, these are gut wrenching, difficult decisions that just have to be made. Once the child is here, the child has to be cared for. I mean, that's just the reality of it. I mean, It comes down to who is going to do that. And my
and
thing was always the family should be looked at first. That's and some of the people would come in with drug issues or they had criminal issues or whatever, and they didn't want their family to know about it. And so they wouldn't tell their family. I had a lady come up from Mississippi to get her granddaughter, and the court said, well, the granddaughter is bonded with the foster parents. They're bonded with them. So it's too late. I said, well, this is the grandmother. She came up here on her own. They're staying at a hotel to come and get the granddaughter. What's the problem? And so we went through a long court thing. It went through the paper. It went through everything. And somehow, I don't think it ever worked out for the grandmother to actually get that child, even though the foster parent allowed contact. And these things are really complicated. I mean, these things can be very, very, very dynamics of it depends on the family, depends on the father, depends on their family. You have to look at their family too, the father's family. And so these situations, it comes down to, hopefully the family can step up, but someone has to take care of the child. And I mean, and that's kind of what the bottom line. When the child is here, the child can't take care of himself. Can't
well,
take care of him or
that's kind of the problem, is it, Dr. Casey? You have to have the child, but nobody tells you who's going to pay for those Pampers, who's going to pay for those shoes, who's going to pay for that first bike. Don't nobody tell you about that.
Well, a bike isn't a priority,
Uh, Come on now, you know what I'm saying. Shoot.
but
I understand what you're saying. A bike isn't a priority. I understand that, but maybe maybe it was his birthday present when he was 16 years old. But
well, this is the thing. We need to somehow instill responsibility when it comes and accountability when it comes to sex, when it comes to having children, and
Well,
just being
don't you
an
think
adult.
contraception might be next? Next thing they might law is contraception.
I
Well,
mean, again,
Dr. Casey, you've already said that some of these folks have mental illness. They have mental problems as opposed. I had a girl that had 13 kids, 13 kids. And
that,
I
but
saw her
but
on the elevator come in. She's like, I'm gonna keep having them till you let me have one. I'm like,
that's not a
what in the
mental
world?
illness. That is a person that want a damn child, and y'all keep taking the damn child from the person. Do you know it's some people that never experience love, and the only thing that they can think about is having a child so they can experience love? Now, whether or
That,
not they
it,
know how or when or where or what to do when they have that child, that is a whole different case. But if a person has never experienced proper parenting, then there is a slight possibility that they may not know how to be a proper parent, and it may take a lot of trial and error. So if you take a child and keep taking children, and she says she's gonna have a child until she have one, then let her ass keep one so she won't keep having more children.
I think that right there should be where there should be something in place where if you obviously see that someone had a child, they don't know what they're doing, they're messing up, they're putting this child's life at risk, there should be a program put into place. I understand they make them go to parenting classes and stuff like that if they want to get that child back. But a lot of people do have that mentality where they will be like, okay, well, I lost that one, I'll just go have another one. And they
Mm-mm.
go and they mess up again. So it should be a requirement, not just to get parenting classes so that you can get that child back, but even if you don't want that child back, you did all that on purpose
once
to get
you've
rid of
had
that child. There should be
multiple,
some type of
once you've
therapy.
had multiple terminations of parental rights, when you go to the hospital, they know that you've had multiple terminations of parental rights, and they put that kid in placement right then and there. Right then and there.
Wow, that's very interesting. I never knew that. Never knew
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. If you've had multiple terminations, that it's on record that you're, what do they call it? You're not palpable as a parent.
See, but a lot
And
of
that kid
things,
goes right in, right from there.
are subjective. When you talk about mental health issues, that can be very subjective because we're basing it
Just like
on
it's
a
subjective to say that you can never parent again. That's subjective too.
Just like y'all thought that COVID vaccine was gonna work, and now you didn't change your mind. That's
No,
subjective too.
it works. That's Mr. Scott. Mine works. As far as I'm concerned,
Yeah, that's how
mine works.
you do what you're supposed to do. Also,
Yeah.
a lot of things
Yes,
work
I
when
do.
you do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, right, right.
But the thing
And if my health hadn't been a problem, then maybe I wouldn't have. But but anyway, go ahead,
the
Doctor Case.
thing is really actually we have to figure out, yeah, humbly be. So is it humblebee or humbly bee? Because I want to say humbly bee
It's
because I
Humblebee.
okay. So the thing is when you talk about so abortion is needed when you think about getting raped or something like that. But when it comes to being responsible, when it comes to sex, because sex is so taboo and it's something that people don't often talk about, you have to one address that elephant in the room, and then you need to address sex because people are curious. People aren't having these babies just because they really always want to have babies. Some of these people are they don't know enough to know what they're supposed to be doing and what they're not supposed to be doing. They don't know about ovulation, they don't know about, the first thing about um safe sex, condoms is not safe sex necessarily. You can still get sexually transmitted diseases as well as pregnant with a condom on. If you don't put the condom on right, if it come off, it's a whole lot of stuff. So there is no effective way to stop certain things, but if you begin to teach about sex, sexuality, parenting and all those things in school, then that can help. But when you remove the narrative of sex and what sex produces, then you leave the door open for people to want to explore. A lot of people, especially when you're young, you're sneaking to have sex because you hear about it. Ooh, sex, 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 sex. And then now you're wanting to experience it. And so a lot of times that first, second experience, you be, oh, how did I get pregnant? You had sex. That's what happens. And not enough people really come up understanding the process of humanality and sexuality. So
Well,
it's like a lot of
there's
these
no
things go
one
together.
there's this is no one size fits all. I
Mm-mm.
mean, one of my
Life is
best
that.
friends, okay, his son got his girlfriend pregnant at 16, and he married her. They're still married today and built a house down in Phoenix. My friend goes down there with them every year and golfs with them. Stays down there the whole summer with his son down in Phoenix. See, this is not one size fits all, and that's what's so difficult about this thing. I mean, but I really think it's not up to the courts. I mean, the courts to me is just
Yeah, and
I
we
don't want
talk
them in
about.
my. I'm just saying I don't want them in my life. I don't unless it's absolutely necessary. Something that just they have to rubber stamp. That's okay. But other than that, no.
I
But
definitely
that's just me.
understand. I definitely understand where you're coming from, Mr. Scott, especially somebody that's been within the system. But and you're right. It's not a one size fits all thing. But Mr. Scott, I'm gonna let the ladies have the last words. I'm gonna ask you to give us your final thoughts for the evening.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Talking to the ladies about a sensitive topic, but I mean, I think that this is really a good thing, to really be able to be in a forum where you can safely talk about things and not have to be necessarily politically correct and all that will come from that we can really just say how we feel and what we think and share our thoughts. So that's my last word.
Well, that's what we've always been about here, Mr. Scott. That's why invited you because I know you had a lot of good things to say. Humblebee, you want to give us your final thoughts for the evening and what's happening with the party locally here?
Right now we're trying to just make sure that we're getting our ducks in a row, making sure that we, anyone who's coming in, we're learning all the stuff that we need to learn before we even step out there and do anything. Um, As far as locally, a few events coming up. We have well in California, we have African Liberation Day coming up, Memorial Day weekend, but that's up in Oakland. Of course, we're working on Juneteenth, making sure that we have our people together for that as well. And as far as the topic tonight, it's a tough situation, but I do 100% feel that no matter what it is, no matter what your opinion is when it comes to abortion or not getting abortion, you can't, if you take these choices away from people because of your religion or because of your views on morals and stuff like that, you're causing so many different situations that can be prevented. I'm you know personally tired of seeing women have multiple babies and not wanting to take care of them or treating them awful. Seeing all these kids in the foster system, especially when you just sit there and you look and see how many black children are in the foster system to the point where they're willing to pay more for you to take a black child. So that's one thing that definitely worries me if this is completely taken away. Um, and as far as people who are pro-life, I completely understand it. I 100% understand that there are morals behind it. It is something that can stick with you for the rest of your life. You have to sit there and think about that child that you got rid of and never know what that child could have grown up to be. Um, but this is something that it should not be up to courts. It should not be up to men. You cannot control what goes on with a woman's body. And like I said, if it gets to that point, then why not start to throw something out there when it comes to vasectomies? When you hit a certain age and you feel that you're ready to start having sex, but you know that you are not responsible enough to take care of a child, you need to consider a vasectomy. It's reversible and it's not permanent. You know, like Dr. Casey said, contraceptives are not 100%, but a vasectomy is.
Well, on that note, you might get a chance to snip me once, but you not getting. Well, anyway, uh, uh, Dr. Casey, take us home before I get. I mean, just the thought. I get queasy. I might have to go take. Is it?
When you think about it, so men can say you can snip me once, but I want you to go back in there and snip it again. But also a woman who, say a woman gets pregnant and something happens to them, so now not only did they have a miscarriage or a situation like that, but if now you find out that you are going into a situation where you have some type of condition, women, we don't have a choice of having anything being numbed when we have to get any type of biopsy. So if we got to go through a little bit of pain because we dealt with something, we slept with the wrong person. I mean, I feel like men can do it too.
Humble B, if you want men to really understand sex and what it's like to be a woman, let a man get pregnant. Let him go through. As a matter of fact, you don't have to go through that. Let him have to go through a monthly. Okay. Let. I get mad when my feet swell up. Come on now. Go ahead, Dr. Casey. Take us home.
So, when it comes to ruling over somebody else's body, I think that that should be outlawed. That should be outlawed. I think that being able to be a whole human is something that we should have the ability to do. This is something that we should learn in school. It's a lot of things that we need to get educated on. I would like to take this opportunity to say rest in peace to Kevin Samuels. This abortion thing sounds like something that would have been right up his alley. Um, when it comes to life is precious. life, the beginning of life, and the end of it, and we have to value it. And like Humblebee said, a lot of parents aren't always ready. Mothers oftentimes aren't ready, and they're very neglectful when they're not ready. And I don't know how to fix that problem other than addressing issues on a social level, getting more people who are socially inclined to help people to deal with their issues, their trauma. Um, this particular move forward would address a lot of different things, not just this one in particular. Um, it will address everything from the Capitol riot all the way down to abortions. But also, we need to learn to be accountable and take things at face value. A lot of times, we're not accountable. We don't see things at face value. We're pointing fingers and looking every way but the way that we need to look in order to move forward in a good direction. And a lot of times the way we need to look is at ourselves, and then allow that to reflect. A lot of times the things that we see reflected or projected is because we have a very awkward view of ourselves. So that makes us handle things a lot differently. Now, when it comes to control of a woman's body, a lot of people just like to have control. A lot of people like to be able to tell other people what to do. And that seems like one of those narratives here. We are
Isn't that called dominatrix? Oh, I'm talking too much. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Doc.
we're in a place right now where women are more powerful and strong and dominating in this world than ever before. This is a place that has not been one that men wanted to see for a very long time, because women used to run things more than men did, and we've been downplayed to nothing but house help. So we are taking back control, and we can that can be seen, and we can see that in the amount of women ran businesses, in the amount of the ability that we have to run and sustain a home, while still doing everything else that has to be done. I think that some people just like controlling other people, and we have to find a way to break that narrative. We are in the newest slave trade that could ever exist. I mean, from when you think about the system, when you think about the court structure in general, when you think about the work structure of how things goes, it's just a matter of getting us to open our eyes. Now, I don't like the term woke because woke has a very negative undertone to it, but we definitely have to open our eyes to the reality of things, but be optimistic with the reality, because in order to change things, we have to see things for what they are. And once we see things for what they are, then we can take a strategic plan to change things. Our biggest problem is that we react instead of being proactive. Instead of being strategic and planning for things, we're waiting for things to happen and say, oh shit, we need to do something, when we need to already be prepared. So preparation is the key word for the night for me. Um, always go pick up my book and tune in to Speaking Freedom TV. We just got to be better at being humans, but we got
What?
to learn how to be human in order to be better at being humans. We are told to deny our emotions, deny our sexuality, deny we're denying all the parts of us, which is just like what Christians do, and we have to break those strongholds.
You didn't give us the days of freaking Freedom TV, Doc.
Oh, I upload every day. It is not live. It is pre-recorded audio and video recordings of various topics. I got 10 seasons right now. You could listen to anything. I talk about everything. Our upcoming seasons will include topics surrounding R. Kelly, and dating in the industry, meeting your match, because a lot of times we think that people are victims when sometimes they go looking for drama and trouble, and then they bark up the wrong tree and then they cry wolf. after they done went and threw rocks at the wolf. It's like going to a zoo and throwing rocks at the bear and then getting in there with the bear and saying, "Oh shit, the bear gonna eat me." Of course the bear gonna eat you. You threw rocks at it for the last 20 minutes. What you think the bear was gonna do? Get in there and play patty cake with you? The bear ain't playing patty cake today. They gonna get so um but so I try to address a lot of different topics, but because I don't
Are
take
you going to do a show? Are you going to do a show on the slap, on the Will Smith
I
slap?
think
You're going to do
I
a
do
show
have
on
an
that?
episode. I do have a episode about that. Because I don't do personal clients, I really try to talk about different stuff in a way that it can help anybody that listens. So yes, I do have episode about that because Will Smith held it down. I don't Steve Harvey talking about he was Steve, don't nobody care about you. You just told Monique to sell her soul for the right amount of money. She should just bend over and
and
let
and Jada Pinkett just said Will didn't have to do that. I can defend myself.
but
But
Will did no
we got
no
to get off there, Doc.
Will needed to do that for himself. Will been getting punked around for a
He's
very
still a
long
punk.
time.
He's still
I bet you he'll
he's
slap
still
the shit out you. I bet you he'll slap the shit out you.
and
I
if
bet
Will
you he
Smith
will. We
and
can
I
end it now. I bet you he'll
and,
slap the shit out at you.
and I bet
Bet
there'll be a funeral the next day.
you ain't gonna do nothing. Will get you too.
You better check my record.
We don't care
you,
about that record. You
you
old
better
now, man.
you,
You old now.
that,
Will
that,
Smith will
that,
smack you.
and I'll shoot him. That's why I didn't say I'd fight him. I said I would shoot him. That's exactly what I
And that's
said.
the problem with these young niggas nowadays. They don't want to fight. They always want to shoot somebody. They
Yes,
don't know
I'm,
make
that's
that
all
no
they
I'm,
want
hands
to
no
do.
more.
You're right.
I'm an old one. I had my time of fighting.
Throw them
And,
hands.
and if he was still
And then
my
Chris
age,
Rock want to
hey,
talk trash.
hey,
Now he
I,
talking. Now he big and bad. He gonna call him the weakest rapper. But the weakest rapper smacked the shit out your ass, so you can't be too
yeah,
weak.
but, yeah, hey, I'm going. But Chris Rock going to the bank every day. Uh,
What you think Will been doing? He bigger.
Mr. Scott,
He was.
you got
He
you
was
you
bigger.
you you
No,
got
he
a
will
book.
always be bigger. Will Smith is I am legend, nigga. Like Will Smith. What movie hadn't he did that was Chris Rock? I ain't gonna hate on that black man because he a black man, and I support black men. But I have never been a fan of Chris Rock. I was like, he's used to playing those roles where he got to insult people for a living, and
But
that
that's
shit to get you
but
smacked.
if you know that that's an insult comic, that's what I'm saying. Then don't
No,
put your
no,
ass
no,
in that
no,
situation,
no,
Mr.
no. And
Scott. You
you
got a
can't
book
play
too.
like that with everybody.
You got a
People,
book too.
I don't joke well. People can't joke with me because I get mad. I don't play those type of games. I'm serious. I don't have a whole bunch of brothers and sisters. I wasn't raised in a house where people could just joke and you just got to take it.
Well,
No, you
then,
joke with me, I'm gonna smack the shit out your ass too. I'm
well,
with Will. I
then,
support Will Smith.
yeah, hey,
Black fire.
Mr. Scott. But I still don't think that you got a better aim than my mama's high heels, because I swear she could throw them around the corner. But so you
Well,
ain't the
see, I
first
know
black
all I
woman with a
know I
temper.
know all about that because
Hey,
my mom used to holler upstairs and help all of our names. And if I knew I wasn't the one that did it, I would go downstairs, and depending on how mad she was, she would whoop me as a tune-up and send me back upstairs and get the one she wanted. So I've been there.
talk about your book a little, Mr. Scott, before we get off there.
Yeah, two books, the Scott Collection, which is a compilation of 500 pages of books my dad did in the 50s, 60s, and 70s on the Twin Cities Black community. It's an encyclopedia of everything you want to know about the Black community in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the state of Minnesota. And our new book, Minnesota's Black Community in the 21st Century. This is a new book that I edited along with our board, the Crutchfield family. They're a family of doctors, medical doctors, along with my sister, Dr. Shonda Scott, who's master's from Harvard, doctorate from Columbia, tenured professor at Oakland University out of Detroit. And so that's a new book where we got a national award from the R. Wayne Pace Foundation on that book. And I'm working on two others. I'm working on a Denny Green book Coach Denny Green, that used to be here, the first black coach for the Minnesota Vikings. It's going to be a real interesting book. And another book that I'm working on is an individual that was blown up with a bomb. They said he was going to blow up Honeywell back in the 60s during the time of all this unrest. And James Lawson was my friend. And so I'm doing a book about James. And so I got 2 books lined up along with the new book. So, but the 21st Century is out and the Scott collection is available. And it'll tell you everything about Twin Cities Black community.
Well, we hope everybody enjoyed the show. Me and Dr. Casey squabbling as always,
Well, Miss
and
M been here for a while.
Humble be glad that you were able to join us tonight. And as I said, a happy birthday to Mr. Williams. And we look forward to talking to everybody next week. Y'all have a good one,
Thanks a
everybody.
lot. Thanks
All
a
right.
lot. Yeah. Good talking to you.
As always, Mr. Scott.